I think there's a bit of ambiguity for most people as to how a convention of states actually can solve this problem. How is what we're seeing right now related to convention of states? And if you look at our national news, and this is kind of our second topic here, we are constantly seeing headlines regarding, are we in a constitutional crisis? And if you actually go back and if you Google, you'll see that this phrase, constitutional crisis, it doesn't belong to one side of the aisle. These phrases have been thrown around by both sides of the aisle for, I'd say, at least the last 8 years, if not longer. This has been a very regular thing. Normally, it's thrown around by the side that isn't in power. But not always. And there is, I think, a legitimacy to people having this question. Are we in a constitutional crisis? And as Convention of States representative here, I would say the answer is yes. We are in a constitutional crisis right now. We are in a constitutional crisis because we have a runaway federal government. And that is where all of this trouble is originating. When you hear people on both sides of the aisle be upset, and when you look at the fact that we have Iowa, we have Obama, everyone is concerned about this government efficiency and all of these ways that the government is potentially doing things. And this isn't one side of the aisle that are having these concerns. It's because people on some level are acknowledging that what's written in the Constitution we learn in school is not what they're seeing play out before their eyes. And we can't get into that in depth right now. We can't get into the fact that we're actually functioning under a 3,000-page Constitution. That can be another day. But there is a reason why our government can legally do things that contradict the Constitution that we grew up knowing. And so, yes, on that level, we are in a constitutional crisis. But what is the constitutional crisis? And that really comes down to the structure of the government and the people who are holding the power being in different proportions than they were supposed to be. People are saying, I don't feel like President Trump should have the authority to do this. I don't feel like Congress should have the authority to do this. I don't feel like the judge should be able to have the authority to do this. And this is where we get that constitutional crisis. So, Robin, could you kind of summarize why, for someone that is looking at our country and feels like we're in a constitutional crisis and feels like our country is completely going in the wrong direction, how can Convention of States be the answer to their problem?
Well, I feel like I'm being repetitive, but I can do that. And the Article 5 convention, I have a slide to share. The first time I heard about Convention of States, it was this part of the presentation that moved me. This is the Constitution, Article 5, and we all know that Congress makes the laws. Mm-hmm. However, there's this big word in here called or on the application of the legislatures of 2/3 of the states. So either the 2/3 of both houses can do this, or 2/3 of the states. This gives us an opportunity to sit down and go through items based on our platform, because the platform has to match across the country, and we have 3 things. For example, term limits. How to hash out term limits. A lot of people agree. In fact, I have another slide to share. 65% of the country agrees. Both Republicans and Democrats and independents agree that we need term limits. So we all get on board and we say, yay, we're excited about that. Okay, now it's up to the people who go to the convention to hash it out. I was actually asked that question last month by a legislative aide when I joined the group in Lansing, and he wanted to know what I thought. And I thought, for sure, I'm glad that I don't have to be the one to go to the convention and hash it out. But I agree that 30, 40 years entrenches them into a bureaucracy where they get reelected, I think sometimes just because they're the incumbent and they have the name recognition, and that's not what the founders intended. And when you get new people in, just like we're going through right now, when, you know, and I've had this happen in jobs, you get a new manager, they come in and they look at things differently. I think it's time to look at things differently. The world has changed. I mean, even Obama said in his notes that we were in a 21st century using, you know, 100-year-old technology across the government. I mean, what did we just hear about that buried tomb of
right, for retirees?
Yeah. So, Sarah, I'm not sure that I even answered your question. I think I went off topic.
Well, let me see if I can summarize. I think if you are looking at our nation and you say, we're in a constitutional crisis, I do not like the direction that our country is going. What you're really saying is, I don't like this amount of power being in the hands of someone that I don't trust. And the only way to solve that problem is to have an Article 5 Convention of States and to take that power back to the states so that the appropriate amount of power is in that position. So you don't have to be concerned about someone you don't trust wielding that power. Now, if on the flip side, you are 100% in favor of what you see going on in our country, then I would say Convention of States is still the answer. Because yes, you may like that power being wielded in the way you like it today, but when that changes and when it's you who are sitting there and the person in power is someone you don't trust, you're not going to like that. And I think our nation has seen enough of that back and forth to understand that there is a time and a place to say, we need to have an appropriate amount of power in the hands of the federal government so that we don't have to freak out every time we elect them. And clearly, we do not have that balance right now. That's why we have this pendulum swing. So Convention of States is the answer. Whether you like what's going on in our nation or not, we have to reduce that power in the federal government.